Once upon a time, in a small African village nestled between thick forests and vast rivers, there lived a man named Ngoma. Ngoma was known throughout the village not for his strength, kindness, or wisdom, but for his laziness. While others rose with the sun to tend to their farms, fetch water, and care for their families, Ngoma spent most of his days under the shade of a large baobab tree, chewing on wild fruits and talking about how life was unfair to him. His 2 young sons, Kato and Badu, were left to fend for themselves. Their mother, Nyota, had passed away many years ago, leaving the boys in the care of their father. Ngoma, instead of teaching his sons the ways of the land or caring for them as a father should, often barked orders at them from his comfortable spot under the tree. Kato, Badu, fetch me water from the river, he would yell. Why are you hunting for food? Go now before the sun sets. He made them toil from morning until night while he did nothing but sit idly. The boys, though young, were hard-working and obedient. They loved each other dearly and longed for their father's approval. But no matter how hard they worked or how much they brought home, Ngoma was never satisfied. He would scold them, saying they were too slow, too weak, or too foolish. They often went to bed hungry, their small bodies exhausted from the day's labor, while Ngoma would feast on whatever they managed to bring back. As time passed, the villagers began to notice Ngoma's treatment of his sons. They shook their heads in dismay, whispering among themselves about how unfair it was for such young boys to bear the weight of their father's laziness. Yet no one dared to confront Ngoma, for they feared his sharp tongue and angry outbursts. One afternoon, as Kato and Badu were fetching water from the river, they encountered an old man sitting by the water's edge. He was dressed in tattered robes, but there was a wisdom in his eyes that seemed as his long white beard flowed down to his chest, and in his hand he held a gnarled walking stick. Come, young ones, the old man beckoned. Sit with me for a moment and rest your tired legs. The boys, though wary at first, felt an overwhelming sense of calm in the old man's presence. They sat beside him, grateful for a brief respite from their work. The old man looked at them kindly and asked, Why do you work so hard when your father does nothing? Kato and Badu glanced at each other, unsure of how to respond. Finally, Kato spoke up. Our father commands us to do everything. He does not help us, but he says it is our duty to serve him. The old man nodded thoughtfully. It is good to honor your father, but a father should also love and care for his children. A day will come when you will grow stronger and your father will become weaker. If he does not change his ways, he may lose more than he realizes. The boys were puzzled by the old man's words, but they thanked him and continued on their way. However, as they walked back to their village, Badu couldn't shake the old man's warning from his mind. What did he mean by their father losing more than he realized? They shared the story with Ngoma that evening, but he merely scoffed. Old men always speak in riddles to sound wise, Ngoma said, dismissing their concerns. Now get some rest. Tomorrow's another long day of work. But deep down, something stirred within Kato and Badu. They began to wonder if the old man's words carried more truth than their father was willing to see. As the days went by, Ngoma's demands on his sons grew even harsher. He expected them to bring more food, fetch more water, and complete more tasks than they could manage. He would wake them before dawn and not allow them to rest until the stars were high in the sky. Kato and Badu grew thinner and more exhausted with each passing day, their small hands blistered from the work. One day, Ngoma gave him an impossible task. He told him to journey deep into the forest and return with enough wood to build a large fire for the village's upcoming festival. I want the biggest pile of wood anyone has ever seen, he commanded. Don't come back until you have it. The boys set off early in the morning, carrying nothing but a small basket of food and a few ropes to tie the wood together. The journey was long and arduous, and as they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew cooler and the trees towered above them like silent giants. By midday, they had gathered only a small amount of wood, their bodies aching from the effort. They sat down to rest and share their meager meal. As they ate, Badu spoke up. Kato, do you think our father will ever be satisfied with what we bring him? No matter how hard we work, it never seems to be enough. Kato sighed, wiping the sweat from his brow. I don't know, brother, but we cannot stop now. As if we return with too little, he will surely punish us. They resumed their task, pushing their tired bodies to gather more wood. But as the sun began to set, they realized they would not be able to carry the amount their father had demanded. They looked at the small pile they had gathered and felt despair creeping into their hearts. We cannot do this alone, Badu whispered. Maybe we should ask for help from the villagers. But Kato shook his head. Father would be furious if he found out we sought help. We must find another way. The brothers sat in silence, their minds racing for a solution. The weight of their father's expectations pressed down on them, and they wondered how much longer they could endure. Days turned to weeks, and Ngoma's treatment of his sons worsened. The old man's warning now echoed in Badu's thoughts every night. Kato, too, had grown weary of their father's harshness. One evening after Ngoma had fallen asleep, the brothers sat outside their small hut, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky. "I've been thinking," Badu began, his voice low. "Maybe it's time for us to leave." Kato looked at his younger brother in surprise. "Leave? But where would he go? This is our home." Badu shook his head. "Home is not a place where you are treated like this. We have done everything for Father, yet he gives us nothing but pain in return. I don't want to live like this anymore, Kato. We could find work in another village, or maybe even live with some of the kind villagers who have seen how hard we work." Kato was silent for a long moment. He loved his brother and understood the truth in his words. They had been loyal to their father despite his cruelty, but they could not survive this way forever. "But what if Father comes after us? What if he finds us?" Badu smiled sadly. "I don't think he would even bother. He cares more about himself than he does about us." The words stung, but Kato knew they were true. He nodded slowly, agreeing with his brother. "Then it's decided. Tomorrow at dawn, we will leave." The brothers spent the night quietly packing their few belongings. They took only what they could carry: a small bag of food, a few spare clothes, and the tools they had used for gathering and hunting. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, they slipped away from their father's hut, leaving behind the life they had known. Bowen awoke later that morning, expecting to find his sons already at work. When he stepped outside and saw that they were gone, he assumed they had gone into the forest or to the river. But as the hours passed and the sun climbed high into the sky, there was no sign of Kato or Badu. Ngoma's stomach rumbled with hunger, and for the first time in years, he realized he had no one to bring him food. He wandered through the village, asking if anyone had seen his sons. The villagers, who had long watched his lazy ways with disapproval, shook their heads. "You drove them too hard," one elder woman said. "They were good boys, but you never appreciated them." Ngoma's heart began to race. What if they had left him for good? He hurried to the forest, hoping to find the gathering wood or hunting, but the forest was silent. Panic set in. Ngoma was not used to fending for himself, and the thought of having to work to survive filled him with dread. Days passed, and the villagers continued to ignore Ngoma's pleas for help. His stomach growled louder each day, and his once strong body grew weaker. And he had always relied on his sons to do everything for him, and now without them he was helpless. One night, as he lay under the same baobab tree where he had spent so many lazy days, Ngoma remembered the old man's warning. If he does not change his ways, he may lose more than he realizes. He had lost his sons, the only family he had left, because of his selfishness and cruelty. Ngoma cried out to the stars in regret, but it was too late. Kato and Badu had found refuge in a nearby village, where they were welcomed with open arms. They worked hard, but this time they were appreciated and cared for. As for Ngoma, he spent the rest of his days wandering the village, a shadow of the man he once was, forever haunted by the loss of his sons and the realization that his laziness had cost him everything.
There are a lot of lessons to be learned from this story. I would love to hear your opinion in comment section. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like, share, and press the red button to subscribe to my channel. Bye.